not a single family in Cuba has not been affected by the blockade. Everyone has been affected because the blockade affects every dimension of the Cuban economy and society. And you have mentioned in your question the problems, the difficulties that Cuba has in getting supplies, medical supplies during the pandemic, and this has been as a result of the blockade. And I think that the most painful dimension of the blockade is the impact on the health situation, on the health system in Cuba. And another example of the health system, of the impact of these sanctions, is that we in Cuba are deprived from acquiring some medicines only produced in the US for the treatment of cancer, for example. Yes. And on the other hand, Cuba is also deprived from the national industry is deprived from to financing to import inputs for the food production. We have been facing very hard situation in this topic, in the food production during this time of pandemic and also due to the blockade. And even the imports we managed to get from the US, very reduced imports of food, have to be done under a very strict license and under discriminatory conditions. On the other hand, also the persecution due to the rules, the financial persecution due to the rules of the blockade, deprived Cuba from using the US dollar in the international market. I think this is a war with an extraterritorial dimension, because every single action, financial action that Cuba needs to do in the international market, it's a problem, because a lot of banks, I can't say that most of them, deny to have financial relations with Cuba because of the fear of being penalized by the US. And this is a fear, I can say a fair fear, yeah, because the US have done this before. Every year they put sanctions on banks that have financial relation with Cuba, and this is the situation. And even the cargo transport companies, they also deny to have relation with Cuba. Here in Vienna, there are international organizations, and I work with these organizations. And for example, the International Atomic Energy Agency or the CTBT, and they have tried sometimes to send to Cuba equipment for projects, for technical projects. And they have faced a lot of troubles to find a cargo transport company because most of them denies the work. Then it's very hard to see in the social media, especially people making efforts to try to justify and seeking arguments to say that the blockade does not affect the Cuban people. Yeah, and they have even said that the blockade only affect the ties between Cuba and the US, and that Cuba could make transactions and trade with other countries. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it is ignorance or it is just an intention of saying this. They have even done reports and documentaries trying to justify that the blockade does not affect the Cuban people. And I wonder, if the blockade does not affect the Cuban people, why do they maintain it? If this policy is not effective, just relieve it. Yeah. But that's not the case, because they know that does affect. And I say to those people that have tried to, in the middle of the pandemic, to justify the blockade, I reiterate that the blockade does affect the Cuban people, affects a lot. And the fact that it has been reinforced during the pandemic is an act of evil, it's an inhumane act.